to 25 minutes or so. And yeah, I had one person so far ask me about how to get their grade up. And, again, guys, contact me individually if you're concerned about how to raise your grade. I asked this person to complete the practice question that I posted, and they did. They wrote the thesis statement and the historical context paragraph, and they did the short answer. And then I was able to go back and raise one of their quiz short answer grades for them. So if that's something you're interested in, guys, it's not just open invitation. You've got to contact me individually for that. But otherwise, I hope you take the practice opportunity. So cool. When we last left off, guys, we had started talking about the ratification of the Constitution and a debate over it. That was chapter 6. I'm not going to really go over it again, but just trying to remind you guys that this was our Federalist and our Anti-Federalist debate, different compromises in the Constitution, whether it's over slavery or representation, understanding about the argument over the proper role and size of the federal government. These are people who just fought against tyranny, and there's some very real suspicions about giving too much authority to a central government. We talked about the strengths and weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. And so again, this was 1775 up until we could ratify our Constitution in 1793. And so, yeah, make sure you are familiar with this one, because I think they will definitely ask you some constitutional questions. I think there's a good chance they will. I still don't know. Tomorrow is April 3rd, and that's when I'll get an email from the College Board giving me the very specific details on what exact questions we'll be answering, or what type we'll be answering, and what are the day options or options of days you can take it. So stand by for that. So that was just a little recap from yesterday, guys. We'll just spend about 20 minutes or so going through chapter 7 here. There we go. And this is for those of you that like Hamilton or have seen Hamilton, guys. This is where a lot of the Hamilton songs will come in. This is where we talk about our first foreign policy crisis. And some of you already have talked to me a little bit about this, asking what Hamilton songs to listen to. But this is where the French Revolution comes into play. This is where Alexander Hamilton's banking financial system comes into play. And this is where we have the Marshall Court, our first really series of Supreme Court cases that solidify the authority of the central government over the states. These are the cases that give them control over interstate commerce. These are the cases like Marbury v. Madison that give them the authority of judicial review. So the Supreme Court is the only one who can say if something's unconstitutional. Really, the vocab term on here that I'm not really going to talk about, guys, is the War of 1812. I just don't really see it coming up in any way, shape, or form. If you really truly want to look at the textbook chapter reading on it, you can. But I would put it out of my mind if I were you. I just do not think it's going to come up. So let's look at the skill targets real quick. I can explain Hamilton's financial plan and its implications for the United States. Let's do that one real quick, guys. Remember, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, two of our founding fathers with very, very different competing visions of our nation. Hamilton's got this idea that we're going to be a nation of merchants, a nation based on commerce, a nation based on trade, a nation that utilizes debt and lending, very much like a modern government does. Thomas Jefferson's idea is a little bit differently. He thinks our society is one that's going to be based on like yeoman farmers, a lot of millions and millions of subsistence farmers spreading out across the continent. Yeah, we're going to have trade and commerce, but it's not going to really be controlled or really, encouraged by the federal government. Under Jefferson's vision, guys, the government's not going to be loaning people money. The government's not going to have a robust program for building roads and canals to facilitate trade. That's where him and Hamilton differ. They have very different visions. And you have to understand that Hamilton's financial plan is ultimately what we'll adopt. The trade-off about, moving the capital from New York City to Washington, D.C. is not that important of a detail, but that is part of it. This is all described in the songs. Oh man, which Hamilton song is this one? I forget. Cabinet Battles 1 and 2 are about the French Revolution. I forget.
Which one are you asking about?
The Hamilton's financial plan one about banking.
I
forget what cabinet battle that is.
It's the first one.
Okay. So anyhow, I think it's cabinet.
Because the second one's about neutrality and French.
In France, okay.
Versus Britain. Yeah.
Gotcha. So listen to Cabinet Battle 1 and 2, guys. Look the lyrics up. They're really, really helpful. Hamilton's plan, guys, is remember, going to assume all the state debts that the states incurred during the Revolutionary War, and the federal government's going to take on a debt. And I know this is kind of a little counterintuitive if debt and credit is a new thing for you, but you have to have a track record of paying off debt if you want people to loan you money. So the basic logic, and I'm really trying to simplify it because, banking and stuff is complex. Even for me, I struggle with this stuff. But in its most basic sense, Hamilton wants us to look like we are a strong, credit-worthy nation to the rest of the world. He wants Europe and other powerful nations to ultimately be willing to trade with us and lend us money. And in order to do that, he is going to incur a national debt and start the process of paying it off. And that's kind of the basis of his financial plan. It's creating a Bank of the United States, and that bank is going to be allowed to issue different loans to different businesses. We'll get into the bank war and Andrew Jackson in the 1820s, but so I don't want to talk about that right now. But just be aware, guys, of what Hamilton's financial plan is. It's assuming all the state debt so we can incur national debt and develop a level of credit worthiness. And it is about creating a Bank of the United States to issue uniform currency. Instead of having each state printing its own money, let's have a national uniform currency. And let's have a federal bank that can issue loans to farmers and can essentially fund the business of the federal government. As our government grows in strength, folks, that federal treasury is going to have a lot more ability to use those funds for different projects. But know what Hamilton's plan is. In order to pass this plan through Congress, Jefferson essentially gets the Federalists to move the capital to Washington, D.C., a southern state at the time, or a southern region at the time. That detail is not so important. Knowing his financial plan is very important, and knowing that it will give a serious level of strength to the federal government will be very important. We still don't have income tax or sales tax or anything like that, folks. Really, all you are paying is really property taxes. There might be a couple other taxes on random goods, but I'm just trying to set a big picture. So that's the first one right there. Know Hamilton's plan. And a few people should be chimed in and said that's cabinet battle number 1. Any questions on Hamilton's plan before we move on there? Hi, some of you. I see a few faces on there. All right. We'll keep moving along. French Revolution, guys. This is cabinet battle number 2, and I'll try to do this one quick and concise. But please be aware, folks, the main thing that often gets overlooked in this that they want you to know for the AP test is this is an example of early American partisanship. They call this the first party system. And this is not, remember, this is not Federalists and Anti-Federalists. That was during the constitutional debate. This is Federalists and Republicans, or Federalists and Jeffersonians, or we can also call them the Democrat Republicans. I don't know why they got 3 names, but they do. They're the Jeffersonians, they're the Republicans, or they're the Democrat Republicans. And these are the people that tend to be a little bit more suspicious of strong federal authority and want to reserve as much power and decision-making for local authority as they can. Jefferson's going to really be their spokesman during this era and epitomize what the Republicans are talking about in this era. The French Revolution, guys, is going to exemplify. I'm losing the word for it, but the French Revolution, guys, is going to highlight this partisan divide. Now, remember, Jefferson and Republicans, they see the French Revolution as a good thing. They remember we're in the 1790s now, and they see the French Revolution as an extension of our own revolution. They think it's the Enlightenment put into action. Why would we not be happy that France has thrown off monarchy? It's a great thing. We, however, and when I say we, I mean our government, George Washington and John Adams and Hamilton and all the Federalists, they're very, very suspicious of supporting France. They see the French Revolution, guys, and they kind of see chaos and anarchy. They're very suspicious about, aligning themselves with the new French revolutionary government. And another important thing you have to remember, guys, is this is not about the French Revolution per se. It's about the war that the new French government immediately goes into with Great Britain. France and Great Britain are imperial rivals, guys. Doesn't matter if it's King Louis leading France or the new French revolutionary government. And by the way, guys, I'm not looking at anyone's faces, so if you have a question, just please interrupt me and speak up, because I can't see you if you raise your hand. So just please interrupt me if you have a question. So guys, this new French government, they immediately go to war with Great Britain. That's what the issue is. It's not, do we like the French Revolution necessarily? It's, who will we align ourselves with in the war that France and Great Britain have now found themselves in? Jefferson and the Republicans want us to support France. The Federalists want to stay neutral, but really neutrality favors Great Britain. They're our main trading partner, and we really, really rely on commerce going back and forth between the East Coast of the United States and England at the time. So again, the Federalists want to stay neutral at best. That's when George Washington will issue his proclamation of neutrality, trying to keep us neutral. But things get a little tense, folks. Remember, there's all those details about things like the XYZ affair, where France tries to exploit our diplomats and charge us or take a bribe from us. There is things with the impressment of sailors, where both the French and the British, kidnap our sailors and make them join their navy. There's that Jay's Treaty that I'm not going to go into detail really right now, but be aware, folks, all of these issues regarding who we're going to support is our first foreign policy crisis. Remembering 100% of the timeline is hard. There's like 10 different things going on for that learning target about the French Revolution. But understanding that it's our first foreign policy crisis, it's going to result in bitter partisan divide between Republicans and Federalists, and it will ultimately result in a really offensive law, the Alien and Sedition Acts. This is where you can be locked up for writing statements against the government or any speech that can be deemed as incendiary. This is where if you're a French person or a non-citizen, you can be, deported really easily for, trying to incite people to support the French Revolution or what have you. So know the Sedition Act, guys. And the reason you got to know the Sedition Act is because you have to talk about it in World War I. You've got to talk about it in a few other cases throughout the course of the year. So this is our first Alien and Sedition Act. That's really the impact of the French Revolution, guys. I could talk more about it, but then it would be a full lecture just on that learning target. I'll highlight it again. It's our first foreign policy crisis. It's an example of the bitter partisan divide during the first party system. We will attempt to remain neutral, although it will be tested. And then ultimately, this will result in the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts to try to tamp down on anyone speaking against the United States government. Cool. I don't think we have to talk about number 3 very much, guys. You already know issues that Federalists and Republicans clash over. Authority of the federal government. Who should control interstate commerce? Who should be able to declare federal laws unconstitutional? If you know, guys, that Jeffersonian Republicans want to be able to nullify state laws, then you're good to go. In fact, remember that phrase nullification? Tell me I've got it on here. I don't. That's crazy. Do I have Kentucky and Virginia resolution? Oh my goodness, I don't. Remember, guys, what happens when these Alien and Sedition Acts come out? 2 states try to overrule them, Kentucky and Virginia. You have to remember this. Kentucky and Virginia, this is called the Kentucky and Virginia Resolves, and they say, no, those laws are null and void. We are nullifying those laws in our states. They're not applicable. But remember, folks, under the Marbury v. Madison decision, states can't nullify federal law. Only the Supreme Court can declare a federal law unconstitutional. So even though you're probably sympathetic with Kentucky and Virginia in this case, it's kind of a whack law. Unfortunately, states can't declare something unconstitutional. So if you're talking about the French Revolution, you've got to talk about the Alien and Sedition Acts here in the U.S., and you've got to talk about the attempt by states to nullify that federal law. Remember, guys, that'll happen again in the 1830s with the nullification crisis. South Carolina tries to nullify the tariff. South Carolina, remember, led by John C. Calhoun, is going to threaten to secede over that issue. You've got to remember to make these connections if you're answering a question. Even if you're answering the question on, the French Revolution, connect it to 1830s nullification if you can. See those. Cool. Analyze the relationship between the U.S. and various native tribes. I'm not going to lie, I don't know that learning target off the top of my head. I'm not aware of a lot of major. We know there's going to be native conflict with the expanding Americans in this period, folks, but I don't want you to focus on number 4 very much. I'm not saying it's not, that important, but you're not going to be asked about Indian conflict in that period. In fact, I probably shouldn't have that learning target on there. They will mention it in that chapter, but you're just going to have to trust me on this, folks. I've never seen that era Indian conflict on the test. When they talk about Indian conflict, guys, they're going to be wanting you to talk about either early Indian conflict with like the Pilgrims, in the Metacom's War, or the Pueblo Revolt, or they're going to go much later. They're going to go 1870s, and they're going to want you talking about Sitting Bull and the Sioux and assimilation and the Dawes Act. I very rarely see anything in between. In fact, I don't know that I ever have seen anything in between on Indian conflict. So I'm not gonna focus our energy on that. I'm not going to focus our energy on this one either. The basic cause and consequences of the War of 1812. Again, guys, you just have to trust me. You can read about it in the textbook. It's not a very long section. I never ever see it. And so I just don't want, we have a finite amount of memory in our brain. And so you have to trust me, and we're going to cut that one. If you're really curious or you really have the mental capacity, you could look it up in the textbook and do some reading up, but I just want you to trust me. The next one is very important, however. The Marshall Court. Remember, guys, we have different eras of the Supreme Court, and they tend to be named after the Chief Justice at the time. In the 1960s, during the Civil Rights era, you've got like Earl Warren and Thurgood Marshall. There's actually 2 different Marshall Courts. This is the early Marshall Court. This is the John Marshall Court. There are other different eras of the Supreme Court, but that's what they mean when they say the Marshall Court. It means a period of time when John Marshall was the Chief Justice. And what you have to remember, and it's really easy, the Marshall Court decisions tend to strengthen the authority of the federal government. And there's like 3 examples, and I listed all the examples in the vocabulary. But when you see Marshall Court, you instantly have to recognize that these decisions tend to strengthen the authority of the federal government. The 3 easiest ones are right up top there, guys. Marbury v. Madison is judicial review. That's about the constitutionality of federal law. Only the Supreme Court can judge it. Gibbons v. Ogden is interstate commerce, I believe. Someone need to triple check me on that one. But I believe Gibbons v. Ogden is the interstate commerce one, giving the federal government authority over interstate commerce. And McCullough v. Maryland, that's another important one, guys. Remember, Maryland doesn't like the Bank of the United States, and they think they've got a way to get rid of the bank in their state. They're just simply going to tax every transaction the bank does. But you can't do that, folks. The the Supreme Court says, Maryland, a state cannot tax the federal government. Sorry, your plan is not going to work. That gives an increased amount of power to the federal government, folks. You don't have to be experts in those. I really can't say much more than like 3 or 4 sentences on either one of those cases. But if you were to see those examples, please be aware that they're going to strengthen the authority of the federal government, and you probably need to be able to say 1 or 2 sentences about what the case is. Marbury v. Madison, guys, is a weird case. It's about like whether or not you have to deliver someone's letter, like their new appointment. Don't even focus so much, guys, on what the cases are about, like the details. Just focus on what they result in. On your textbook, guys, in your textbook in Chapter 7, they'll have a page in Chapter 7 that lists all of the Marshall Court cases and what they're all about in a very, very short, easy summary. Louisiana Purchase. All you guys have to know is it kind of goes against Jefferson's strict interpretation. There's nothing in the Constitution about the federal government buying that land. But yet Thomas Jefferson understands that it jives with his vision of a nation of yeoman farmers. And so he is willing to spend, I think it's $15 million, purchasing it from Napoleon. And again, guys, that will really double the size of our nation, and it will turn the nation's attention to the West. You're never going to have to be an expert on the Louisiana Purchase, but what they want you to know for the test is it goes against Jefferson's strict constitutional interpretation. There's nothing in there about the federal government purchasing that land. But under the necessary and proper clause, you could totally argue and lawyer the fact that the government can make that purchase. And when it suits Jefferson's agenda, he's able to bend his interpretation and does it. That's the type of thing they want you to know about the Louisiana Purchase. They don't want you to know necessarily about Lewis and Clark and the Cora discovery. It's about that, and it's about the fact that it jives with his vision of yeoman farmers, and that the nation's attention will start to be focused westward, guys. And you know that as soon as we start acquiring land out west, what issue becomes really prevalent? I need some interaction. Someone yell at me. As we acquire more land out west, what issue is going to become more explosive and important?
Native Americans.
Slavery.
Slavery is the big winner. If you said conflict with natives, you're totally right. But I would argue slavery is going to be the bigger issue, folks. Conflict with natives is absolutely perfect, though, of an answer. But slavery is the one I'm looking for. Expansion of slavery out west. That's all I want to do today, guys, on that. I really feel like I covered as much of Chapter 7 as I want to. Again, look at the vocabulary. And if you can't say 1 sentence about it, then I'm questioning how well you know the chapter. Whiskey Rebellion. I didn't mention that. Look at that. I also didn't mention the Haitian Rebellion, guys, or Haitian Revolution. I'll give 2 minutes to each real quick, and then we'll finish up. Whiskey Rebellion, guys, is again another episode of a localized rebellion where you've got essentially lower class farmers upset at taxation. But this time, guys, the federal government has the authority to do something about it. They have the ability to send in essentially federal troops to quash the rebellion. This is the only time that a president has led troops into battle. Are there more details about the Whiskey Rebellion? There are. In fact, the farmers are basically told that they can't pay their tax in whiskey. And that's what starts and prompts the uprising. Now, this is an uprising against the federal government. Many of these people in the Whiskey Rebellion are veterans of the American Revolution. A lot of them wear their Continental Army uniforms and such. But this time, unlike during Shays' Rebellion, the federal government has the authority to do something about the situation, guys. Honestly, I don't remember more details than that. I would need to refresh myself. It's one of those vocabulary terms, and I know what it is, but I can't remember more details than that. This essentially, the AP test wants you to know this rebellion, folks, because it simply is demonstrating that, you remember how the Articles of Confederation were weak? Well, the Constitution has solved many of those weaknesses seen through our handling of the Whiskey Rebellion. That's what they want you to know about it. As far as the Haitian Revolution, guys, it's really easy. You don't have to know any of the details other than it is occurring right about the time of the French Revolution. It is basing itself off the American Declaration of Independence. It is stealing language from our founding documents. It's stealing language from the French Declaration of Rights, the Declaration of the Rights of Man that Robespierre, not Robespierre, I forget who actually issues that in the French Revolution, but you guys remember the document from AP Euro last year. It's those Enlightenment ideas about overthrowing oppressive governments, about every human being born with natural rights. And remember, guys, France during their revolution abolished slavery in France, except in the Sugar Islands. France was not about to let that profit from the Sugar Islands be gone. And again, that's a slave plantations down in those Sugar Islands. So they abolish it in mainland Europe, but not on the islands. And again, that's what that Haitian Revolution is all about. If you're mentioning the Enlightenment, you should mention all three. You should mention the American Revolution. You should mention the Haitian Revolution. You should mention the French Revolution. Never being an expert in any of them, folks, but seeing that pattern and seeing those connections that I've just tried to repeat like over and over and over again. So I think that's all I want to say on those. We got through a bunch of the vocab, a bunch of the learning targets. I was scrolling down and I saw on the left George Washington's farewell address, guys. They love to use that document as one of the most commonly used documents on the test, guys. And it just is encouraging us to avoid foreign entanglements. It's advising Americans that foreign alliances can potentially be messy and be very, very wary. And George Washington writes that address, guys, because of his experience during the French Revolution. Who will we support, Great Britain or France? Who will we support? Washington got a lot of kind of shit talked about him during that era for Jay's Treaty and for his willingness to support Great Britain during that time by remaining neutral. So anyhow, cool. I'll open it up to questions for a minute, and then that's all I've got for you guys. There will be no live stream tomorrow. I want you to just complete the review packet. If you complete the review packet, I'll give you credit, and it should be really easy. So I'll be available by email tomorrow all day. So shoot me any questions you want to, or if you want to do a Google Hangout, a brief Google Hangout, let me know, and I can make that happen. Do we have any questions, guys, on this era, Chapter 7? Our first major foreign policy crisis, the first party system, Federalists and Republicans, the Marshall Court. Anything? I like Julian's logo as a frog. I don't know if you can see Julian's logo, but it's a cool frog.
That's Dat Boy.
Thanks, man.
Dat Boy. Apparently everyone knows Dat Boy but me.
It won't let me change it from 7th grade.
Right on. Okay, guys. Well, if no one has a question, sounds like everyone's good. Again, tomorrow there won't be a live stream, but I am available. We'll do another live stream again starting on Monday. Yeah, what's up, Dre? Is that a question?
Just a question from the review guide. It says, how did the 7 Years' War impact the French? I'm not exactly sure, but didn't they just like get a lot of debt?
So the main thing to know for that is it will cause the French to really lose their grip on much of inland North America. Remember, the French control everything from the Great Lakes all the way down the Mississippi River down to New Orleans. And when they lose the French and Indian War, that kind of spells the end of their imperial aspirations in the New World. They're not going to go away 100% yet. They're still going to have some French outposts. We still have all the influence. We still got thousands of French fur trappers. They've still intermarried with Indian tribes. Creole French culture is still very, it's a very real thing. But in terms of the French government's imperial aspirations, they're basically done in North America. Okay. They still definitely are involved in beaver trade. They're still Frenchmen, but France is no longer really expanding or trying to colonize much in North America. A little bit of beaver trade going back, and that's it. I would say that's what I would answer for that question.
Mahoney, if we already turned it in, like we already turned it in yesterday, that's fine, right? We didn't have to turn it. Okay.
Yeah, Aaron, I had some people turn it on Monday. So even without hearing the live stream and the lecture, they were just ready to go and knocked it out themselves. If you really do it and watch all the videos, it's a couple hours of work. And if you're really sharp, you can probably do it without the videos in an hour or less. So
yeah, because I watched the videos, so it took a while.
I think that's a good idea. So cool. Any other questions or comments before I stop recording, everyone? All right, I'll go ahead and stop recording there, guys.
You said that we're starting up next week again?